But we had a question before the show began. Michael Allen sent this over, and he said, "Can you please address the problem of the negation of the revelation of God in Calvinism? That the revelation of God in the incarnate Christ has been supplanted in Calvinism by a still hidden God, a hidden deity who can command one thing, but secretly will and decree another, whose attributes of truth, love, righteousness, holiness, etc., can be so grossly unlike any human conception of those attributes as to make any correspondence between divine act and human understanding unintelligible." I can leave that back up there for you if you want.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. I didn't know if you were going to say something or if you want me to start talking.
Oh, no, I was catching my breath here.
So
I'll throw that over to you.
If Scripture is a revelation from God, which we all will affirm that it is, if you're a Calvinist, you have a difficult time determining whether or not it's a true revelation from God or whether it's a misleading revelation from God. Because ultimately, Calvinism is essentially Gnostic for two different reasons. It's Gnostic in its origins, and because, Augustine basically reverted back to his Manichaean Gnosticism in order to try to have a formula that would defeat Pelagius. But it's also Gnostic in its practice of, at the end of the day, a Calvinist claims to have understanding and knowledge that comes from outside Scripture. At the same time, they're criticizing the Bethel movement and they're criticizing the charismatics who have extra scriptural revelation. They ultimately believe they have access to information that non-Calvinists don't have, and they can't show you it in Scripture. They say, well, it's a secret. It's a secret thing. God has a secret will that he doesn't tell us about. Then what on earth is Scripture for? What is it telling us? And ultimately, it's a lie. So a couple of examples occur to me. There's a very simple verse. 1 Thessalonians 4:3. It's a very simple verse about the will of God. And it says, "This is the will of God, even your sanctification, that ye should abstain from fornication." Right? That's a very clear statement about what the will of God is. Now he's talking to Christians there, so we know that some Christians, like the one in 1 Corinthians 5:5, they go and commit fornication. In Calvinism, the fornication was the will of God. London Baptist Confession, chapter 3, paragraph 1. Everything that comes to pass was divinely decreed from before the foundation, all that kind of stuff. Okay? Everything that comes to pass. And if that is a true statement, then nothing that follows it is necessary to be said. So in Calvinism, the guy committing fornication is the will of God, but they have to create two different wills of God now. Now I have a secret will of God and a revealed will of God. Or I have a decretive will of God and a prescriptive or
permissive.
What do they call that? What's the word they use there? It's a P word.
Or prescriptive or...
What was the first one you said?
Permissive?
Preceptive.
Oh, preceptive.
A preceptive, like a precept. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So they have this. So they split up into two wills of God. I have a decretal, like a decretal will of God, and you don't know about that one. That's not revealed. That's somewhere tucked away. You'll never see it. But Calvinists know about it. That's where the Gnosticism comes from, for as far as I'm concerned. And then you have a preceptive will of God, the precept you should follow. Now, that can go over well if you're talking about a command like rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing. That would be a preceptive will of God, but not everybody obeys it. This is not a command or a directive or guidance. This is a statement about what the will of God is. For this is the will of God, even your sanctification, that ye should abstain from fornication. So they have a secret hidden Bible or secret hidden revelation. They somehow know that the guy that committed fornication in 1 Corinthians 5:1 through 5, really was the will of God, even though there's no verse that says it. Whereas somebody like me, I would look at 1 Thessalonians 4:3, I'd say, that's not the will of God. It's very clearly not the will of God. And in 1 Corinthians 5, it's also presented as a bad thing there. Mm-hmm. So I would believe in things like rebellion and in things like not being the will of God. But if you are a strict deterministic Calvinist, in London Baptist Confession, chapter 3, paragraph 1, everything that comes to pass is decreed by God. What you wind up with is you have a Bible that's a lie. It tells you something's the will of God when it's not. And there's a real will of God that was not revealed to you, which Calvinists somehow Gnostically know about. And you can't rebel because everything you do is the will of God. So if I were, I could commit any crime and it would be the will of God.
The most evil, vile sinner is doing precisely what God decreed him to do. Just like the most righteous, obedient follower of Christ is doing precisely what God decreed him to do. Both are doing God's perfect will.
Absolutely perfect will. No rebellion, no sin.
Yeah,
there'd be no such thing as sin.
No, there isn't. There's no rebellion. It's just perfect obedience.